Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the 2024 Kawasaki Ninja SX. This is one of my favorite all-time bikes. I almost bought this bike at one point, and today in this review, we're gonna look at it in the context of 2024 bikes, because I've talked about this bike before, and I'm gonna continue to do a full review talking about the features, but I haven't been able to talk about it in the context of what else is out there right now. So in this review, I'm gonna go over everything I can. It's gonna be an in-depth review, and we're gonna show you and talk about things that the other videos aren't talking about. But I may not answer every question that you have about it, and if I don't and you wanna know something about it, you just wish someone online or someone somewhere could answer your questions about this bike, let me know in the comments below, because I'm filming here at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, Jim Gilbert's Power Sports. This is the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country. It's January in Canada right now, and this showroom is packed. There are motorcycles as far as I can see all throughout this area. So if you want to see these bikes, they have them in stock. And the best part for you, if you're watching this video and you're nowhere near this dealership, is they give me complete access to their entire vehicle lineup. So if you have questions that we don't get to, let me know in the comments, hit the subscribe button, and we'll get back to this. And do me a favor, maybe hit the subscribe button anyways to support the channel. And the more subscribers we get, the easier it is for me to go to more and more and more dealers and say, hey, here's what we do. Let's get some information out to people, and that'll help us grow. So that's what we're doing right now. Let's get going with this review. So there's a lot of views on this bike, and a lot of people talk about how maybe it's dated, partly because it's been around for a while, and we're gonna address what's dated and what is very much not dated on this bike. But one of the things that's dating this bike is that this is a sports tour in the traditional sport bike style. Really, there's very few other bikes in this class with this kind of capability that really kind of match what this is. Really, the Suzuki GSX X1000 is probably the best competitor. And then there's little things in there where people start getting really nitpicky about debating. So for instance, the Suzuki has more horsepower. Now, if you look at the torque curve of this bike actually has more horsepower, the entire torque curve, the entire horsepower curve, until it reaches sort of its red line, whereas the Suzuki will have more peak horsepower. So if you drive only at red line, then yes, your Suzuki will have more power than this. But for the rest of the riders out there that are riding anything but at the very top piece of red line, you're gonna be driving in more horsepower and more torque in this one. Now it's nitpicky, but it's worth pointing out because both those bikes are far more powerful than you need. Now this used to be sort of back in the day, the engine started in a full-on super sport bike, and now if you look at Kawasaki's categorization, there's sort of the sport, the super sport, and the hyper sport category. So this is in the sport category. Still makes about 140 horsepower, give or take. Kawasaki in Canada and the United States doesn't give us exact horsepower numbers, but that's sort of the agreed upon number. But what this bike does that's unique in the class is it is exceptionally refined. Now, the other thing that may make this dated to some of you is that it has a seating position in a sport bike style where most new sport tourers have the seating position in more of an adventure bike style. Does that matter? Will it matter to you? A lot of people are gonna say, oh, this is crunched over like a sport bike. So why don't we just start right there, take a look at that, and we'll talk about seating position to help you decide if that's right for you, and then we'll start digging through the pieces and parts of this bike, giving you real close-ups, giving you a really good idea of what this bike is all about. All right, so just for reference, I'm about 6 feet tall. I don't know my inseam. Everybody always asks that, probably 32 or so inches. I'm a proportionate 6-footer, and let's jump on this. If I jump onto an adventure style sport touring bike, I cannot flat foot pretty much any of those bikes. I can easily flat foot this bike. So one of the things that's a real strength about this design is not just that the overall bike is lower and that gives you a little bit actually better handling, it's also that it is far more approachable for a lot of people. Flat footing at a stop sign, stoplight is something that a lot of people want to do, they talk about it, they get nervous when they can't do it. This bike, you can do it far more easily than just about any other sport tour out there in 2024. So let's talk seating position. This has very tall risers. We're gonna take a look at these a little bit later, the very tall clip-ons, I should say. And we'll take a look at these a little bit later when we get in close here so you can sort of see the differences here. But again, as a casual sort of 6-footer, this is a very comfortable position. There's a gentle lean forward. On an adventure bike, you'd probably be more like this, and you're like, wow, that's a huge difference. But for most people, the comfort difference on you know, this versus this is very little. There's very little weight on my hands. You know, I can easily support my body just leaning like that. You do have an adjustable windscreen. We're going to show you that. We'll just show it briefly here. It has 3 positions of adjustment. It does not rise, but it does tilt. If you want a little bit taller windshield, there is a taller windshield as an accessory from Kawasaki. So again, that makes it more touring than more sporty, but this continues to keep that sport look. We'll show you how that adjustment happens a little bit later in the video as well. Really, the compromise you're going to make is your rider triangle, but really the leg triangle here. The hip to knee to foot position there. On an adventure bike, you're going to be a little bit more like this, or adventure style sport touring bike, you're going to be a little bit more like this. On this bike, you do have that more of a sport bike lean. Now, for me, I don't find this in any way uncomfortable. On a long trip, yes, you could move it around a little bit, but I still think there's plenty of ways to move around your feet just like this. That's going to be the personal decision that you have to make. But to pretend and to hear other salespeople from other places talk about how this style just isn't comfortable, you don't want to be on a sport bike style, you might be just fine on a sport bike style, and then it gives you some inherent advantages. So let's talk about those advantages as we go through this bike in detail. So when you see the Ninja 1000 SX up close, it's an impressive bike even in 2024. But let's talk about this a little bit lower, more compact type style than a traditional adventure bike. Think about it as maybe a Porsche 911 versus a Porsche SUV of whatever type of SUV you want to have. Both are incredibly sporty. The SUV is probably far more sporty than anybody who drives it, their driving ability, or most people's driving ability. And this is the same way. Most manufacturers of sporty bikes, sport bikes, have recognized that a sport touring bike, the level of sport you put into an adventure style sport tourer is probably well beyond the rider's ability anyways. But that doesn't mean that this doesn't give you advantages, that a Porsche 911 doesn't handle better than the Porsche SUV. And that's really what this is. The compact size of everything, that sport bike feel, still gives you an inherently better chassis, an inherently better package for true sport riding. And if you want something that can cover a lot of miles, we'll talk about how this can do that very well, but also want something that's a lot of fun, that's where this bike shines. Let's start taking a look at the components and seeing how this is sort of put together to give you that riding experience. So if you've seen my videos before, we always take a look at the front wheel, and we talk about in the front wheel how you can really tell the manufacturer's intent with a bike like this. So this is, how is this bike designed to be used from the manufacturer? Pretty much the front wheel will tell you everything. So first thing we're going to start with is just the tires. This is a traditional size, it's a Bridgestone tire. A lot of people look past that. What you may not realize is that Bridgestone actually designed these tires in conjunction with Kawasaki for this bike. So the tires on this bike were designed with this bike in mind. It's something worth pointing out because it makes this thing a little bit more special. Again, it's that little bit of detail here, a little bit of detail there that end up showing up on the road in the way that you ride it. So then we got traditional sport bike components in here. You've got the upside down forks, which is again going to give you that less unsprung weight in there, more stiffness up top. Again, more stiffness up top gives you a good riding thing. This is going to be pretty standard for the package here. You do have your fully adjustable shocks here, so you've got your adjustment here. We've got adjustments on top of the forks as well. We'll take a look at there. Radial mount calipers. So again, this is true sport bike stuff. Dual discs, lots of ventilation, floating discs, all the stuff you traditionally see on a true sport bike. And then you got a couple stickers in here. KTRC ABS. We do need to talk about the electronics in this because they are very fully up to date on this bike. So that's worth mentioning here. But we'll move our way through and keep talking about that as we go. So now let's take a look at the heart of this bike. Now, again, a lot of bikes in this class have legendary engines. Some have been around for a long, long time, Suzuki and Kawasaki being one. Others are a little bit newer, but all of them are pretty much very reliable. All of them have pretty much been very known and proven, and most often in other bikes. This is a 1043cc, so it's a slight bit bigger than the other 1000cc bikes out there, which are usually just 1cc under 1000. So a little bit extra. If you're one of those people that subscribes to there's no replacement for displacement, well then there you go. You've got that. Very torquey, very flat torque curve, power everywhere. You do not have to shift in this bike very often. If you just want to kind of take it in 6th gear and accelerate from there, you have a ton of power to do that. If you do want to shift, you can do that. There's a quick shifter with up-down quick shift. We'll talk more about that in a second when we get to technology. But this is a very good engine, very reliable engine. Now, a lot of people will look at this and say, okay, that's the exact same engine that's in the 2024 Kawasaki Versys 1000. And it is, but it is tuned quite differently in the Versys. This one is tuned up to 140 plus horsepower. The Versys has much less horsepower. So you end up with something that is a lot more sporty nature, sporty tuned. But again, big, smooth four-cylinder, and then that's tied to an electronic throttle, and that is worth pointing out because that electronic throttle makes it very, very smooth and gives you some functions through the technology that really make it stand out. So we'll talk about that right now. So if we talk about electronics, pretty much everything in this class has some version of an IMU. What that does is it can sense, and you're going to see in the dash when we get to it, if the bike's leaning left, if it's leaning right, if it's wheeling, if it's coming down, and also if it's twisting on any of those functions. So if your back end swinging out, that kind of thing, if your front end's falling out, all those kinds of things. So there's a lot of system sensors, or one sensor that can really sense a lot of things, but what the manufacturer does with those is really what matters. And a lot of manufacturers will talk about cornering ABS, this has that, a traction control that's lean sensitive, this has that, but really it's the, there's all these acronyms in this, so this is the Kawasaki Cornering Management Function, KCMF. This one kind of sums up a lot of things that go on. And let me just read it from you. From entry through the apex to the corner exit, modulating brake force and engine power to facilitate smooth transition from acceleration to braking and back again, and to assist riders in tracing their intended line through the corner. So basically what Kawasaki's technology does is it isn't just about cornering ABS and cornering traction control. It also has a sense of, if I've come off the throttle and the bike's gonna have some dive, the IMU senses that just from the coming off of the throttle. Same thing with coming on the throttle. The bike's gonna have some lift in the front end. So a lot of the systems can handle anti-wheelie, anti-slip, traction control, corner ABS, regular ABS. But what this thing is doing is watching you as you enter the corner with both your brake force, so it knows how much brake force you're putting in. It also knows how much engine braking force is being put in. So sometimes you might not be braking very much, but you might have had an aggressive downshift, and that's causing a lot of, gyroscopic movement in the bike. This is sensing all of that into a corner, and then it's sensing you balancing yourself around the corner as the bike compresses on its suspension as you're digging into the corner, and then as you're kind of lifting off the suspension, leveling out and coming out of the corner, it's sensing all the way through. It's not just sensing your wheel speed sensor, it's using the gyroscopic forces and understanding where you are with your throttle through the electronic throttle of what you're doing, how you're doing, and how the bike is reacting, and all of that allows you to do just that. Find your intended line throughout the corner, from braking through the corner and coming out of the corner. So where Kawasaki's a little bit different is it really ties those together very well, and that goes to the nature of this little bit more sporty kind of feeling bike. It's not just about one system doing one thing, another system doing another thing, and using the sensor. It's about combining those systems together so that while you're riding, everything's working together to give you that sporty ride that you want, and in some cases to make you a better rider than probably what you are. So that to me is a big key, because a lot of the time we think about these electronic traction control, wheelie control, all those things as things that will catch us in an emergency, where in reality on this bike, it's not just about waiting for the emergency, it's about tracing your line the entire way through, understanding how the bike and everything's reacting at the same time so that it's ready to intervene, it's ready to understand what you're doing and get you on the line you want. That's what makes this bike pretty cool. All right, so let's get down to one controversial piece of this bike. This is a very large exhaust, and this is very typical of a lot of bikes in this class. So I left my cheat sheet up there on the seat. Anyways, what this is this is unique because it's placed down here on a sport bike type location instead of up here. Still to this day, on sport touring bikes that have the exhaust mounted up high in that adventure styling, there are still some of them that have the bags that are either carved out to have less space in them, or they're set further out to move your center of gravity further away from the center of the bike. Kawasaki has some great accessory bags here. They're not included with this bike, but you can add them as an accessory that can clip into here, like on the Versys 1000, the Versys 650. They hold a full space helmet. They lock with the key. If the key is out of the bag, in other words, if it's in your, because it can be tied to the ignition key, if it's in your ignition or it's in your pocket, you know for sure when you're driving that they are locked and secured, because they cannot be locked and secured without the key in them. They cannot be unlocked without the key in them. They cannot be, if they're not secured, the key won't come out. So if the key's in the ignition, you know they're securely locked and secured to the bike. If the key's in your pocket when you're out for lunch, dinner, whatever, you know your gear is securely locked in. So hard bags that are lockable is great, but they're not included. Is that a problem? Is it not? Let's talk about why that might be actually a good thing. So is it a problem that it doesn't have bags? I hear that people say this all the time. Those should be included in this bike. Well, keep in mind, this bike, and I almost never give pricing because the internet gets mad at me because the bike goes on sale somewhere or somebody's dealer is selling it at a discount. So I hate saying pricing online. It's easier to use a link in the description, and the link in the description will send you to up-to-date pricing. But the MSRP for this right now in Canada is $15,899. A lot of sport touring bikes are well over $20,000 in this class with the same equipment, so you have something that's a very competitive price even within Kawasaki's own lineup. The bike that I bought is the Kawasaki Z900 RS SE. It's the bike you're looking at right there. It has none of the IMU technology. It has ABS but no cornering ABS, traction control but no cornering traction control. It doesn't have the Kawasaki cornering management function. It doesn't have cruise control, LCD display. It doesn't have any of that stuff, and it costs more. So this is a great value, and the fact that it doesn't include the bags isn't a big deal because even when you put the bags on, it is still under the price of many of those adventure style bikes, which really don't offer you any more equipment over this in many cases. So let's move on to some of those electronic pieces and equipment, cruise control, dash. Let's take a look at those right now. All right, so we're about to take a look at the dash in here, but I do want to show you the windshield. It's hard to see because the handlebar is turned, but there is a little push button here, and there's one, two, I can't even feel them there. 1, 2, 3 positions there. So 1, 2, 3. I believe there's just 3, maybe 4 of that windshield. Now again, it doesn't rise or lower, but it does tilt. And on the style of this bike, that tilt does give you a lot of extra wind protection from leaning it, but it also allows it to tilt back, get your head tucked in for that aerodynamic sporty feel. So there is an adjustable windshield there. I do want to point that out. It's hard to see on this camera, but let's zoom into the screen now here. You can see the key in the bottom of your shot there, nice centrally located there. Turn that on. So there's a lot of ways to control this computer. There are some buttons right here, but I'm going to use pretty much everything on the handlebars, which we'll show you in just a second here. So you have a pretty good dash here. Now when we talk about hits and misses versus 2024 bikes, because again, trying to get this smoother there, as we do this, we're looking at this bike compared to other 2024 bikes. So you're going to find that this screen is smaller than on other bikes. Now from a pure legibility perspective, a lot of the fonts here are actually larger than on larger screens. A lot of them have more blank space, white space, black space, whatever you want to call it, because again, the black and white can be inverted here. So you can have a daytime and a nighttime look. Most of the time Jim Gilbert here sets them up in the black setting, and I kind of prefer that. What I should point out though is these are very, very legible screens. Even if you had it bigger, I don't know that offers a whole lot more function. But again, if from just a wow factor, sometimes a 5 or a 7-inch screen looks really impressive. This one's not that. So what you have though is everything you need in here. So I want you to look at this sort of trip A section here. We're going to cycle through there first. So trip A right there. You cycle through trip B. You go through here and you have a lean angle. Now I like and I don't like this. This is actually a bar graph that grows left and right while it does it. What I think would be cool is if it just left a bar at its maximum lean angle for 5-10 seconds or something like that, just to sort of see where you last were. It does kind of hit that function when I hit the next section here, which is 13 degrees, it's gone to the left, 7 degrees, it's gone to the right. Obviously this bike hasn't gone very far, it hasn't done anything. We haven't reset these either. But again, that's using that IMU, that ability to sense the bike's positioning in any which way and showing you the left to right lean. Kind of a fun feature to have, but it's in there, it is what it is. Then there's the odometer there, we go back to trip A. Hitting a separate button here, you're gonna see down here, we were on instant kilometers per liter. Now you can do liters per 100 kilometers, miles per gallon US, miles per gallon UK, all that stuff. So we were on instant, we hit the switch once, we went to average, so instant and average fuel efficiency. Then you have your range, kilometers to empty, that'll have to be driving to see that. And then you have your average speed, which is kind of nice to know if you're on a longer trip. Hey, we've been averaging, 100 kilometers an hour, you got 100 kilometers to go, should be there in, 1 hour. So average speed is nice to have, total time as well. And then your battery voltage, just especially if you have accessories in there. Then you have extra things like temperature gauge. It's always available. Outside temperature, 18 degrees right now. A clock in here. One thing you don't have is this bike does not come factory with heated grips. And if you get heated grips, it doesn't show up in this screen. That to me is a miss compared to many of its competitors. It's not the end of the world, but Kawasaki's heated grips, although they work fine, some people say they're not as hot as they need to be. I have them. They're fine for me for what I need, and I again ride in cold weather in Canada, but it would be nice to see that in the screen. So that is one area that heated grips aren't in there. That to me might be a miss, but let's show you those handlebars and show you how the heated grips would work on here if you did put them on, just to show you, sort of how things are set up here, because you do have good controls here. So taking a look at the left side controls, these are the controls I was using up here. We didn't talk about in there the rider modes. There is sport, there is road, and there is rain. So you hold down up to get to the very top one, which happens to be sport. Then you can hold down the next one, which happens to be road. Hold down the next one, happens to be rain. So there are 3 drive modes. There's also high power and low power mode on this bike, but 3 drive modes kind of do what you need to do there, which is just nice and handy, easy to do. And the rest of the time, it's just clicking these buttons here. So you have your select buttons there, you have your reset button there. All of those are easy to reach, and the reset's not going to be accidentally hit. So you're not going to reset your average speed or reset your lean angles or anything like that. You're not going to reset them by accident, which is nice to know. And then you have your cruise control here. Again, electronic throttle, electronic cruise control, set it and forget it kind of thing. And then you have over here, you push that out to turn your high beams on, you press it in to turn them off, and it is a flash to pass function there as well. Horn is buried down low, signal lights there, and you've got the hazard light as well. Hazard lights are pretty much expected in a touring bike. If you were to get heated grips, this moves over just a couple millimeters here, and you have in between your grip here a little extra button that matches the look of these exactly. I have it on my Z900 RS. It's available on many Kawasaki bikes, but I don't love the system. It works well as far as hitting the button. It looks good and that kind of thing, but there's a light on there that flashes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then it goes solid into a green. So it flashes orange, goes solid to a green, and that's how you tell you're in the level 3. And then same thing with 2 and same thing with 1. So my problem with it flashing and not just having a 3 lights, 2 lights, 1 light is you can't tell at a glance what it's at. It's an issue that could be solved if it was in the screen. So again, as we talk about this bike, honestly, for 2024, those would be minor things that it'd be nice to have. Do have adjustable clutch lever here. I can push this out here. I know it's not in focus right now, but there's 5 different levels. That's going to set it from my first knuckle to my next knuckle. So again, basically first knuckle to next knuckle is the range of adjustment in there. And what that does is not just change you for the grip, whether you have a long, large grip or a small grip. It's also going to change sort of where that grab point is on that clutch. There is a slipper and assist clutch on this, so that makes it both a little bit lighter to pull as well as allow you to have an aggressive downshift, and to, instead of locking up the rear wheel, allows the clutch to slip, which is going to allow a little bit extra sporty driving and some nice safety measure as well. We should talk about a couple other things. Let's get to that right now. If we're going to talk about gear shifts, we should talk about, or at least the clutch, we should talk about the shifter. So there, of course, is your shifter here. It has got a quick shifter, which means you can just, once you get into gear, letting out that clutch, once you're in first gear, whether it's up or down, it will very momentarily pause the ignition or pause something, I'm saying it wrong, and allow you to instantly shift up or down. Works really well on an aggressive riding, works fine in a regular touring riding. Not every sport touring bike in this class has that standard. Some have to be added as an accessory. This one is standard. Other ones have it built in mechanically, but it has to be software unlocked, and that's from different manufacturers as well. So again, you're getting all of this included. The other thing worth noting is you have these pegs, the nice rubber padded pegs. You can kind of see how soft those are. A lot of adventure style bikes kind of use adventure style pegs, and that's going to put a little bit more of a steel, a larger plate. This has that nice sort of roundedness to the peg to allow you to really reposition your foot and still feel like you're locked in when you are shifting with your foot there. So to me, that's not an advantage or disadvantage, but it is a difference compared to some of the other adventure style bikes. Taking a look at the top of the suspension fork here, you can see that we do have adjustable suspension. We talked about that on the bottom of the fork, top of the fork. You've got sort of identical on both sides, so we'll only show you the one side now. And again, these are those clip-on risers here. Instead of coming out and down like a typical sport bike, they come out and quite a ways up. And again, the picture that you're seeing on video, it's hard to show the rise here that they do come up, but there is a nice rise and a nice angle to them. So again, it's a very comfortable riding position. We're going to zoom right in there for a second. Actually, we'll zoom in, lose some clarity here. You can see it sort of says tension there. There's a H and an S, hard and soft adjustment there. Sorry about my camera work there. But you can see that sort of carved into there. So instead of painted on, carved on, but you get a sense of what you're doing there. Pretty easy to adjust if you want to start tweaking things. Obviously, if you do start tweaking things, they are set up in the manual for your standard settings. So you don't have to worry about how to, if you start tweaking it, if you're not used to suspension settings and maybe you find that it's not what you want, just go to your owner's manual. It tells you what the standard settings are. Generally, it involves turning it all the way to the right or all the way left, and then turning it back so many turns, half turn, full turn, whatever it is. So you don't have to worry if you start messing with your suspension. If you can get it back to normal, that's all easy to do. One other thing I should point out, let's see if I can do it without cutting here, is we'll come down to right over there. You do have a space for a 12-volt port, but there is no 12-volt port. Now, you may wonder where you want to put your GPS or something like that. With these clip-on style bars, there is an accessory from Kawasaki which goes into this tank mounting piece here and gives you your GPS sort of in front of down here, which is just below your key there. So that's a nice convenient spot to have basically one screen there, one screen here. It does place it a little lower. There were probably other ways to mount it up on the screen here, accessory mounts, but you do have the ability to mount a GPS. You do have the ability to mount a 12-volt port right there. So you have, the ability to make this a true tourer with a GPS right there. So while we're talking hits and misses, we gotta talk about one little minor thing, and this is I don't know if you've noticed throughout this video, but my negatives have been very nitpicky. They really don't matter to most riders, but again, for a 2024 bike, many Kawasaki bikes, including many Kawasaki bikes that are less expensive than this, lower in the lineup than this, they don't have incandescent signal lights. So again, this one has LED headlights, that's great, they're up to date, but it doesn't have incandescent signal lights. This one does, both front and rear. Not a big deal, but again, lower level bikes, the Versus behind me, just the Versus 650 behind me, the Versus actually Versus 1000 doesn't have that, but yeah, the Versus 650, other those 650 bikes, they've all moved to incandescent bulbs. Now again, these ones are not mounted on stocks, they're mounted into the bodywork, so they're super clean looking, but for 2024, I would have liked to see LEDs by now. They haven't got them in there. It is what it is. So let's talk about who this bike is for and who it's not for. A couple little things worth pointing out. You can get the side bags on here, but you can't get the top rack on here, or for whatever reason, Kawasaki doesn't sort of allow that, whether it's, like you can get one or the other. So the mounting brackets here or here. In other words, top box or side bags. That's different than the Versus 650, the Versus 1000. So even within Kawasaki's lineup, you can do some of that stuff, but not on this bike. I don't know why, center of gravity style, there's somebody in their engineering team or legal team or something that decided that they shouldn't do that, or maybe marketing team, I don't know. But like I said, you can get a top box here from Kawasaki, you can get side bags from Kawasaki, but you cannot get side bags and top box. That's worth pointing out. So let's look at this in the class. What's now available in 2024 in the sport touring class that isn't available here? Well, like we mentioned, larger screens, things like heated grips that would be standard and mounted in, but for the price point of that, not a huge concern for me. The windshield, although it tilts forward and back, that's probably going to give you all the wind protection you need. It does not go up and down. It is going to be a little bit lower than some of the other bikes. Now that is going to give you clean air to your head, but good wind protection for more, if you're tired, that kind of thing. But you can get the touring shield as an accessory. So again, if you get the touring shield as an accessory, it's about 4 bolts to pop on the lower shield and the higher shield. So for me, that's actually kind of a win. In the warm weather, you may want to keep on a lower shield, drive around town doing your normal driving, but if you go on a tour or in the colder weather, you may want to have the larger shield. That's something worth pointing out. This one also doesn't have the hand covers that a lot of the adventure style bikes have. You have that on the Versus 1000. So what do you get? Oh, we should mention one more thing that's available is while this has cruise control to the electronic throttle, there are bikes coming out now in this class that have radar-assisted cruise control, which you may or may not want, but when I say in this class, they are more expensive bikes for sure. Now, this one creeps closer to those bikes when you start throwing on things like heated grips and the side bags, but it's still a pretty good value. So, jumping on this bike again, who is it for and who is it not for? This is a really good value bike for something that is incredibly powerful. And when I say incredibly powerful, I get it, there's 200 horsepower bikes out there, but for an on-the-street bike, this thing has got all the power you need to have way more fun than you need to have, but it also makes everything so smooth. The electronic throttle, even from a start, is just so precise, so well done. The fueling on this bike, everything is just really well done. The suspension to customize it, and then again, that overall sporting feel. So if you kind of grew up like me, maybe in the 90s, you were starting to look at your first bikes and some of those sport bikes looked pretty cool to you. By the time you can afford one in your 40s like me or even older, you get into something that feels and looks like a sport bike, but I'm telling you guys, this thing's just as comfortable as any adventure bike out there for most of us. Now, if you have a funny back, funny wrists, different stuff, there may be a reason why it's not more comfortable, but for many of us, this is just as comfortable as those bikes, and it really does place you into a fun sporting bike, and it is lighter and feels lighter than a lot of those taller bikes. It's more accessible with your feet down, that kind of thing. It can take most of the luggage you need for a weekend adventure. You may or may not be moto camping in this without the top box, but you do have lockable storage on here. You can certainly do an Airbnb or a motel, but I mean, I would probably still camp on this. You still have your seat that you could use and strap things to. For two-up camping, again, probably for two-up long-term traveling, although Kawasaki advertises this a lot. The rear seat here is quite comfortable, but the reality is there are better rear seats, better passenger seats in this class now, in that more upright category, that more tall category. Even just the Versys 1000 would be strongly recommended. So again, within Kawasaki's own lineup, you can get the same engine, same technology, basically in the Versys 1000, and really end up with a better two-person bike. So who is this bike for? A great around town bike, a great country roads bike, and a great mile muncher that can go on the highways, really keep up with that cruise control. Where this bike shines is when you go on those long tours to get to those great roads, you end up getting there with a great sport bike instead of a great touring bike. And to me, if the adventures you're looking to have include the motorcycle as part of the fun, this bike is going to be part of the fun. If your intention is just to get there to sightsee and explore, and you don't need the sporting intentions of this, there are other bikes out there. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what this bike is all about. Still one of my all-time favorite bikes, still very sporting for anybody who's not going to the, I mean, you could take this bike to the track, but anybody who's not going to the track, this is well beyond your capabilities. This thing's gonna give you all the sport you need. So really great bike in 2024, still a really great value. The technology is there. We talk about the engine, proven engine. You really don't need anything newer, better, anything else in an engine nowadays, power-wise or anything else. There's a lot going for it, and I'm still a huge fan of it in 2024. So let me know what you think. Is this still the way to go? Do you want to see more sport bike style touring bikes? Or are you fine with the adventure style touring bikes? Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on those, and we'll debate it. I will be reviewing everything 2024 as it comes in here for Kawasaki and a bunch of other brands. So if you made it this far, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and leave me a couple comments here. I want to thank Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals for giving me complete access. Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, #1 volume dealer in Canada. If you're anywhere in New Brunswick, you just got to check them out. Even in the winter, they sell bikes here all the time. There's a whole lineup of sold bikes here that they've sold ready to go for spring. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you in the next one.